So our current, whatever we are saying is based on the known. We all know that the bigger value is in the unknown. Every technology has shown us that things, the
Ah,
value that got created was in the
mm.
unknown. Whoever felt that an ATM machine would unleash banking in a way that it did,
Yeah.
initially it was just going to remove jobs.
Mm.
Whoever felt that the handloom was taking away the job of the weaver would unleash the fashion revolution that we see today. Who would have felt that the candle maker will die and electricity will take off in a different way, things like that, right? And if you saw some of these news articles, all these labs are hiring philosophers, less engineers, right?
Mm.
What do they tell you? Basically, they are saying is, I think we can get engineers, we can get AI to code, but who's to determine the guardrail? And frankly, if these things
Mm.
can do pretty much anything possible in this world, and we are talking about AGI, then you really need to think about the deeper questions that are relevant. And who's the
Yeah.
best people who are thinking about those deeper questions? The philosophers, right? So, who would have ever imagined that an AI lab would suddenly be hiring philosophers?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's where the biggest scarcity is. So, I think we have to look at where is the scarcity shift happening.
Mm.
Scarcity earlier used to be in the coding domain.
Welcome to the podcast on AI, how AI is impacting the org design. I'll attempt a brief introduction of you, Pankaj, because a short podcast like this cannot do justice to your introduction. Suffice to say, you are the Group Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Aditya Birla Group. You are renowned technology expert in general, but very specifically on data and AI and analytics. You bring a very unique blend, which I've seen, Pankaj, rarely, unique blend of business acumen and technology mastery. But the bigger part is that you continue to share your knowledge, insights through podcasts, through talk shows, and the lectures that you do. We are honored to have you here, Pankaj.
Thank you, Tilak. Great to have. And I also find that talking to different people, in this case yourself, also helps me think about things that I may not be thinking myself. So for
Hmm.
me, actually, these podcasts are learning lessons because I think I learn a lot by discussing with people rather than reading from books. So for me, all these interactions are actually teaching for myself.
No, the last time around you spoke about saying that you write when you're able to respond as well. I think that stuck with me as well. Thank you.
Sure.
So, so let's get on to the subject, that is impact of AI on the org design. I'll start with the most basic, right? So AI is everywhere, right, Pankaj? It's impacting everybody. Everybody is talking about it. Everybody is working on it, etc. But more importantly, it's impacting the entire organizational fabric, including the org structure, right? So much so that organizations have started reporting how many digital employees that they have. So first question first, how is AI impacting the org design in general?
Yeah. So let me start by saying that many a times I'm asked a question in the way you posed it. How is AI XXXXX? And my immediate response is that AI on its own is actually quite dumb. It doesn't do anything. It's us who are required to do something since AI is present in the room. So
Yes,
first of
yes,
all, I think
yes.
we have to figure out if AI or any other technology exists, how should we respond to it? What should we do about it? So I think, and the reason I say that is, I think we need to claim agency rather than
Yeah,
surrender it. That's
yeah.
what makes us human. That's what makes us impactful. That's what makes us move the world forward. Versus become lazy and dumb and allow things to happen and say AI did that or some technology did that. So I think it's important for me to always claim agency to say we are trying to do something, leveraging everything else versus the other way around. And that's true not just with AI or any technology, but just like any individual human agency to say what am I going to do with it? So just a
Mm,
nuance, but
mm,
I think it's an important nuance for me to say that AI
mm,
or anyone else doesn't do anything. We as individuals do something. Now, having said that, I would pose the question that AI presents us an opportunity to do
mm,
things differently, just like any
mm,
other technology
mm,
would
mm,
present us an opportunity to do things. And it's
mm,
then up to us to see how do we do things differently.
mm.
And like I always say that, whatever we are doing now, there are some lessons in history for everything if we look
Yeah,
hard enough and if we
exactly.
find parallels. So we
Mm.
can take a parallel of, let's say, the steam engine. Everyone talks about steam as the
Yeah.
one old invention. I don't know whether, James Watt or someone saw the kettle boiling and saw the power of steam or whatever, but that's where it began. And someone said, what will Steam do to the org design or to the society? Valid question. And no one knew the answer. James Ford certainly didn't know the answer. So I think over time, what happens to any technology, that it starts somewhere. And I would use the current terminology of, agile methodology and sprints to say, over several iterations, whether designed or undesigned, things will make progress. I think today we have an opportunity to design it and make progress more meaningfully rather than undesigned and let it flow. So, look, going back to the steam engine, I don't know exactly, but I think the steam engine was probably born maybe 50, 100 years after steam was discovered. And maybe by people who were not even present when steam was probably discovered, right? So I think one has to remember that the flow from one to the other is happens in very unexpected ways, and it has happened to every other technology also, whether it's steam or electricity or even internet. When internet was born, who would have imagined all the subsequent children and grandchildren of internet, what it could do? And therefore, for AI, I mean, of course, everyone says that AI is different, and I don't know, maybe whenever earlier technologies also came, someone may have said that they are different from the previous one. So I don't know. I'm sure every technology is different in some way. But the way I look at currently, in my observation set, what is happening is that AI is just allowing so many new things to happen. It is limited by our imagination first and our existing predestined structures next. So maybe I'll maybe give a slightly longer answer, Tilak, because you posed a question which is taking me to a very basic level. So I'll give the answer in the term what we are doing and what we are seeing in our own companies to make it really real rather than say
Yeah.
what should or could happen. So in our company, which is the Aditya Birla Group, we have so many different group companies. So we have a great place to experiment with various things. And our own central team, which is almost like an R&D team, our experiments have led to a kind of a pattern that we found among our own experiences that we have codified for ourselves. Because our job is to say, if you do experiments, can you find patterns? Can you codify? And then you can do it more intentionally. So instead of doing things intuitively, can you now do it intentionally? So intuitively, what we would do is we'll solve a problem using data and AI. We'll tell the business people, okay, now we've solved it for you. Pick it up. They will learn. They will iterate. They will do this, they'll find ROI, this, that, and the other. Then they'll find the next strategy problem, this, that. And so after having done this for a few years, a couple of years ago, we sat down and said, what's the pattern? What's the structure? What's the framework which can be used more intentionally versus intuitively? And what we found, and the answer to your question will also emerge from there, is that there is a three-layer framework that we found. And we call it the ways of thinking, the top layer. So you can call it the strategy or the why layer. The ways of working, the operating model or the sustaining layer, and the ways of doing, which is the technology layer. So ways of thinking, ways of working, ways of doing. So you can think of almost like the head, heart, and leg. In fact, I use my marathon running example also that you need head, heart, and leg, all three to run a marathon. You have to imagine the Bombay Marathon. You have to have the cardio VO2 max, and then your legs will come into action. So in the same way, these three things have to come together to make magic happen. So ways of thinking is really what is worth solving, why do we do it, what is the strategy, find out the right priorities. That's the why layer. The what is, you solve it, you do it through technology. And the sustaining layer is the middle how layer. Now we have broken them also into the constituent pieces so that they are understandable and reusable. Now, the easiest piece is the bottom piece, which is the technology layer. You have data science component, data engineering, data architecture. These are the deterministic or what you can understand and you can create and you can reuse and all that. The other two are usually, what people would call culture. And we have tried to articulate culture also in terms of its constituents. So the ways of thinking or the why and ways of working to us are the two cultural elements. So ways of thinking, we have three boxes. The first one we call the AI maturity, and I'll come to each one by one. Second one, we call it strategy and governance. And third one is the innovation and research. The middle one has talent, funding, ecosystem, and scaling through productization. Now, how do these 10 sort of come together? So I'll give you an example of a new business that we went into. So we started with the first box, which is the AI maturity. So we told them, see, this is the journey. The AI maturity is just one slide, which has 4 stages. Starts with reactive, proactive, contributing, shaping. Very logical. You can have any 4 words, and every format has something. Framework has this, that you start as a reactive one, and you mature to shape, which is you're leading. So we tell people the message is it's a journey, it's a iteration, it's multiple streams. So be in it for a long while. Don't judge it prematurely. That is the message of the first box. Really, it's just that. Second one is strategy and governance, where we kind of did a strategy workshop with them, 2 days. We had done some pre-work, thought-provoking, made them think. In the end, they came up with a set of 10 data AI related projects that they felt could meaningfully help their 3 year strategy. So the idea was strategy workshop. This is our strategy, but how can we create a differentiation for ourselves? So they only came up with some 8, 10 of them. And then we prioritized and said some are simple, just do it. We can guide you, you do it. Some are slightly more complex, but industry solutions or something that we had done was available. And then some were totally new and innovative, which we had done. So we said the third one is what we'll work with you together on, because this is totally new. This is what an R&D team should work on. The other two will guide you, support you, and you can do it. So that was the strategy and governance at place. Then once we identified 3, 4 areas, then innovation and research. Now we said, okay, how do we solve this problem? Multi-agent, whatever. Take the new, so innovation and research is really think of some new ways of solving it rather than solving it in the previous way. So we did something, some thought on what it should look like. So this is the ways of thinking layer. Telling them a journey, come up with a set of priorities. Those prioritize one, you come up with, how the solution will look like. So this is the thinking layer. Then you actually come down to the doing layer, data science, and you create an MVP, do something, and you start working with the team members to put it in action. That's one. The last one is the most crucial one, because that is the more sustaining in the long term there, and where I mentioned people, funding, ecosystem, and scaling. So people has many flavors to it. One could be, how do you engage the stakeholders in making the solution? How do you train them to use it? How do you train their managers to ask the right question? So how do you make the whole organization, the people part of it, relevant? In some cases we have had to hire people for them, in some cases we have to train them. So the talent part is to make sure, because the humans are one who's going to actually think about it. What are the various elements relevant now and later, and keep focusing on the people part, in a focused way. The funding part is to say, what is the ROI? Is it making sense? Because if you don't articulate that, you may not get the next funding and all of that, right? So the funding part, sometimes it is ROI, sometimes it is, how much should I spend and things like that. So in one particular case, we said, here is the price, 100 crore is what the value opportunity is. We'll do 10 experiments of, 1 crore each. So we'll spend 10 crore. And hopefully 2, 3 of them will succeed and we'll realize the 100 crore. So, almost like a VC funding. So that model took shape very well and took off. Otherwise, in the past, what used to happen in that team was they will do 1 or 2 projects, they will fail, and the CFO will cut the funding. So this new funding model made it more meaningful for them to say, okay, that makes sense. We understand some will fail and we will not, check each of them. So that's the funding thing that one place happened. But something to do with funding has to be kept in mind, because you have to follow the money. Ecosystem is, you don't have to reinvent everything. Look at the ecosystem, bring startups in, bring other partners, then create a solution collaboratively, and so on and so forth. And how to do that. That's also a skill. And then the final one is, how do you productize and generalize so that it can scale from one store to another, one factory to another. So net, we have almost like we used to have the DMake methodology for continuous improvement. We have the 3W methodology for AI-led transformation, which is very holistic in nature. And I call it that, you have humanities at the top, commerce in the middle, and science at the bottom. So we are a full stack methodology. It's not just a technical methodology of DMake that it used to be. Culture is also a part of this. So the problem definition is more holistic at an organizational level, where you have strategy, you have finance, HR, everyone involved. So this is not just a CDO, CIO thing, which typically sits at the bottom, but all elements of the organization. If you look at each of these boxes, people, HR is involved, ecosystem, procurement is involved, funding, finance is involved, scaling, some other teams are involved, strategy workshop, strategy people are involved. So no one is untouched. So the idea is to define the problem and the framework at an organizational holistic level, so that everyone knows that they have a role to play one way or the other, and they all have to come together to make it happen. I think the challenge is that usually AI or any technology is defined only in the ways of doing box, and therefore we are solving a more limited problem. And when it fails, mostly the reasons for failure are in the other 2 boxes. So whenever you hear, 80% M&As fail, 80% of anything failing clearly means that you have not recognized a few variables. And I would argue that you have not recognized what we all call actually is the culture variable. And we have tried to define culture in these top 2 Ws of ways of thinking and working, and saying, if you can recognize it and have a way around it, there is no failure. Because if you think about it, this model, I don't see there is any failure. Of course, there are sprints and some things will work and some won't work, but that's lesson learned and you keep moving forward. So I think this is the way I think about any technology, any new capability being inserted into the ecosystem. And whether it is AI or whether it is anything else, If everyone is involved, everyone has a role to play. There is this playbook. Everyone understands that there'll be failure. We'll get up and run the next sprint again with those lessons learned. I don't see anything which can be called a failure. Everything can be called a lesson learned. So I think a slightly longer description, Tilak, than you would have expected on what I think about
Yeah,
AI-led
sure.
business transformation.
Yeah, I think what you're also saying is that one is how the projects are getting implemented through these three layers. But what I'm also hearing is that organization as a whole, the new business that you went in, will also start following such kind of a organization structure, whereas there is a thinking layer, there is a governance layer, and then the doing layer. And taking your marathon example, we have to strengthen the doing layer, the legs, more than anything else.
Actually, it's the other way around.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think the legs are visible and they will get strengthened, anyway, because everyone, if they have to do something, they will just check the legs and the number of steps. I
correct.
think what is unseen is the heart and the head. My
Yeah,
intention to run the Bombay Marathon and my VO max is not known to anyone. And if
correct.
I also ignore it, I'll be doing a very fatal, injustice to doing it. So I think if you look at it from a Simon Sinek three circle framework that he has of why, how, and what, to me the why is the head, the how is the heart, and the what is the legs. And in a company also, the strategy is the why, the operating model is the heart, and the final outcome or the this thing is the what. Now, I think since the what is visible, there is a bias to analyze the what and find meaning in it. But frankly, the what is actually an outcome. So I think we have to figure out the why, master the how, and the what will happen on its own. If we
Yeah.
can somehow imagine that, I think that will be much more better, because the why and the how, or the head and the heart, or the strategy and the operating model are invisible, undocumented properly, and therefore ignored. And that's why many things fail.
I think that takes me to the next question, really, because some of it you answered already, but I'll anyway ask because there is a view, Pankaj, is that if you take the organization as a whole, like the new business that you spoke about just now, after the insertion of AI, the way you put it, right, is that organizational charts, which used to have these hierarchies and the who do I report to, etc., will become more accountability charts, wherein people would be more shown as what do they own, what are they accountable. For example, you might have read already recently, is that Cards 24 recently abolished the entire hierarchy and called everybody a builder. So, how will AI, at a business sense, the new business that you're going into, how is it impacting the traditional hierarchy layers, issue? Will?
So I think there are, two types of leaders, or you can say two types of situations. One is that you do things organically, and the one is that you do things in one big bang approach. And there can be a case for both. There are some leadership styles who say we will do it big bang, some others say we'll do it organically. There are some situations which are in such a dire state that if you can't do big bang, you won't survive, and all of that, right? So it could be either of the two. I'm, of course, of the opinion that it's better to do organically if you can. You don't have to disturb things and just let it organically go into it. So I would say that in this, again, 3W mechanism that we mentioned, there are these roles, there are these people who are all involved. I think as they progress on this journey, naturally they'll realize that many of the current roles need not be backfilled when those people go away, or
Hmm.
some new roles need to be brought about. So I
Hmm.
would say that the same way that we apply the agile approach to product development, that the product 6 months later does not have some of the old features and has new features, and we
Hmm.
don't even know what the future of that product will look like. If you were to ask Amazon or any product firm that, okay, tell me what will your this thing look like 1 year from now, they won't know. They say we'll do the right thing and it will be more relevant than it is today. See, the
Hmm.
answer to any a product manager would be it will be more relevant, and relevance is measured by more users, more engagement, more whatever, right? More buy, whatever, right? So I would say, can we apply the same thing to the org design? That the org design or the org structure or the design rights or the title can continue to evolve. It doesn't have to be big bang, and it should look very different 1 year from now, 2 years from now than it is today. And in some cases, you would see that it is already happening. So in many cases in our own organizations, clearly we are seeing two big changes. One is some digital or analytics type of roles are coming which didn't exist. So new roles
Hmm.
have come.
Hmm.
In some
Hmm.
cases, the existing role people have been trained to become more tech, data, digital savvy also. That is
Hmm.
also happening. I
Hmm.
think certain roles over time will also disappear or morph. So I think
Hmm.
if we allow, and if you are the HR leader or the CEO, you should also continue to look at your organization to say, which roles can morph into something else, which role don't need to be backfilled, and make the organization design also look like a product. That this
Mm,
product will not resemble the same thing 2 years later. This should look different. And if you're
mm,
doing it by design and doing it with thought process, then I think it will happen much more nicely than
mm,
if you do it in any other way. I think because and I think people will also morph. Some people will move into new role. They will acquire new skills and all of that. Many of my own friends who were Six Sigma people, I was a Six Sigma person once, became digital transformation people in the same company, right?
mm,
So over
mm.
time, those companies probably got rid of those Six Sigma roles. They became something else. They became someone else. Now
Yeah,
those people still exist, but they have a different job title. That
yeah.
organization also has a different org chart. So if you just
Mm,
even look at some historical evidence of newer technologies, and I'm just using Six Sigma as an example, because this was also a great phase when lots of people were Six Sigma people and
yeah,
all of that
yeah. Agree with
back
that.
in the day. So, and you can look at any other thing and say, what has happened in those organizations? The org chart would have changed. People's titles would have changed, JDs would have changed, but they happened intuitively and not very intentionally. So I
Mm,
would argue that things are happening, but can you design and make it happen more intentionally and not feel that, so if it happens without your thought, then sometimes you feel there is some loss somewhere, something is moving, and, we don't like
mm,
change. But if we think that we are actually
mm.
affecting change, then we feel in control. So
Yeah.
that's what I try to argue, that if we think that things will change and evolve and it is with some positive intent, then we feel better and in control versus feeling like a loss.
I think you actually answered the next question, which is which I wanted to ask you about. Because, for example, and then I make it a little more specific now, because you Cognizant and some of the others have talked about forward deployed engineers. And Pankaj, you'll be thinking this is what we did 25 years ago as well, when we are in the JAT sessions and so on and so forth, right? So some companies are also some reports are talking about instead of the pyramid structure that organizations had, there'll be a bulge and and the diamond structure and so on. But going back to your point, saying that it has to be intentional, thought through, makes a lot of sense. But overall, two questions that I had: what do you think of this whole forward deployed engineers concept? Second is, do you think the way the structure will look like, will it become different in the sense it'll look like a bulge type of those two questions I wanted to combine, if you will.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at consumer platforms like Amazon or many others, right?
Mm.
They don't seem to need any forward deployment engineers. This is more of a B2B construct,
Mm.
that you have a large company, it
Yeah.
has a specific need. You need someone to really understand the innards of that organization, their process, and try to use this new technology and marry it with their process, so that magic can happen. So I
Mm.
think
Mm.
every role and every job, there's a why attached to it. Why do you need it, right? So I think the
Mm.
why for this is, as you rightly said, frankly, management consultants have been forward deployed engineers of the body of knowledge that the big MBBs had
Yeah.
created, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think, again, this is new. And like I said, there's nothing right or wrong about a new name. I think if that name sort of sticks, it galvanizes people, it makes them feel good, that's fine. So I'm not a big, challenger of any old wine in new bottle. I said it's good to sort of rename things. You feel good about it. You wear the same sweater, but you call it something else and this, that, and the other. That's fine. So I think as long as it's a positive thing, I have nothing against it. Now, when I heard this title, Forward Deployment Engineers, first time, I read that Palantir book and this, that, and the other. Then I looked at our team. I told our people, oh, actually, we are already that. We didn't know it. So in our team, what happens is we are a bunch of people sitting in Bangalore, and our analysts are solving problems in factories and other places. And they sometimes go sit in the factory for 2 weeks and deploy something. They sit in the store somewhere in dollar. So they were, because if they have to be effective, they had to be in the crime scene, as we say, to understand what's going on and then make themselves relevant and all of that. So I think they were intuitively doing that, right? Now,
Yeah.
I think FDE gave us a good label. And I would say that it really helped us, I would say, doing things intentionally versus intuitively. So I
Uh,
do think it was a good thing that I learned that. I mean, I could have also dismissed saying, oh, we are doing it and there's nothing wrong. I
yeah.
started telling people that, this looks like a new job in the market. And you guys should know that you are FDs. So when someone asks you who you are, someone more famous than us has given you a name. use that name because that's what you're doing, and you have been doing it before that term became popular. So I do think that labels are good. Also depends on
Yeah,
the context and
absolutely.
how you use it. So I do think it's a good thing, and we all relate to it. And this is someone within. Plus, it also relates very well to my 3W construct that I told people that now all of you, if you are an FD, you have to be a full stack human being. You have to know the strategy,
Mm,
you have to know the change management and the funding and the technology. You can't just be a technology person. So the other two W also you have to master the
mm,
strategy aspect, the commercial
mm,
aspect, the people aspect, and all of that. So I did feel that this FD construct gave some more validation to the 3W that we had come up with on our own to say it
mm,
makes sense, it is useful, and let's utilize this also. So that is one that FD is a good thing, and I think it will continue to be relevant because many of these new tools and technologies are rapidly evolving, and you need a translator to help make it relevant. And frankly, for every technology, we have always had translators. In the past also we had business function
mm,
consultant and
mm,
that and the other. I think the shapes change, but the or the need remain the same, that how do you find the bridge, because both these people need a translator. So that's one. The construct of the org design, I think, is in my mind slightly more nuanced. I
mm,
would say that the org design or any structure has to be in sync with its surrounding, right?
mm,
Just that's how evolution has happened. Evolutionary
mm,
biology say that the structure evolves to be in sync, in balance with its surrounding. And what I mean in the organization construct is to say that if I'm looking at an organization construct in South Korea or Japan versus
mm,
India, I would look at it slightly differently. I would
mm,
say that the demographic bulge of South Korea and Japan is in the other way. They will have far more aging population. They have a reverse bulge. They have more younger people, less younger people, and more older people. So they have almost a reverse pyramid. In India, we have this kind of a pyramid. So in India, I would love to leverage the strength of India, which is to say the young people. So I
mm,
would design an organization which brings a lot of young people at the bottom,
mm,
utilizes their creative energy so that they follow the pyramid of the demographic around me. If
mm,
I was sitting in Japan, I would say there aren't young people coming here. Can I design an organization differently to retain my older people and utilize their strength? So I would say that the geography that I can apply it to an industry. Let's say within India, there's an industry called manufacturing or something which people are not going to work for, and their demographic pyramid is looking like Japan. Then in that industry, I would apply a different org design philosophy to say how do you do it. So I would say that whatever that design is has to be in the context in which you are operating in. What type of supply of talent is available to you, and how do you best deploy it? So I don't think we can think of those structures in isolation. They have to be thought in terms of a next 5, 10 years on what is the context, in the talent context that you are in, and designed accordingly to take advantage of the talent ecosystem around you.
super. So, I think Pankaj, I think going back to the forward deployed engineers, I'm now seeing it in a new light because, as you rightly said, it actually gives a new meaning to your role, right? Oh, this is what I am. So that's, I think, one of the other many takeaways. Going back to this bulge or whatever, the other thing that I wanted to add to that is that the reason why that bulge people are talking about is because the lower end of jobs, supposedly, AI will do a lot more. So hence the people there is much less. I know demographics supports us and we can add more people, but because AI will take away many of those, that's why the bulge was being thought about. You think that it need not be necessarily the case.
So I think what tends to happen is that we have to look at the constraints in which we are thinking right now, and
Yeah.
what constraints can go away. So
Mm.
my argument is, again, using the 3W framework, is that uh, technology, the ways of doing, or the technology of the
Wow.
bottom layer was
Yeah.
hard and
Mm.
expensive. So the constraint was there. So you paid a lot to the engineers, and because you can do coding and all of that. Now the constraint shifts upward to the other two layers. I would say the biggest constraint, and we all know that intuitively, is the ways of thinking. Because we have thought of our organization in a certain way, and in a certain ways of working, thinking, doing. And in that constraint, what you say is true. Now, there's an opportunity to lift the constraint to say, which business am I in? Who am I? What can I do? So if you
Mm.
lift that constraint, a lot of other things can happen. Now, the question is, lifting that constraint is far harder. This constraint goes away quickly, right? Just like any technology came, and the technology, what first it does is automate and simplify. That is the easiest thing, low hanging fruit. This is there, remove it. What is not there and can be done is always the last stage. We have all seen that, right? So as they we always say, run, change, transform. So initially it attacks the run part, then it goes into the change parts. In fact, you can always say that it goes from reactive to shaping. That initially it will just react to something, then remove it. But the biggest opportunity which is waiting for us is much later. So who would have imagined that when Michael Faraday sort of discovered electromagnetism, apparently 45% of the US economy now uses electromagnetism in one way or the other. So I think any new
Yeah.
technology when it first comes, no one knows what it can do,
Yeah.
and that inventor also has no knowledge. Frankly, the inventor frankly doesn't even care. They are just curious people trying to figure something out. So I think many things will happen which we don't know. So our current whatever we are saying is based on the known. We all know that the bigger value is in the unknown. Every technology has shown us that things, the
Ah,
value that
okay.
got created was in the
Mhm.
unknown. Whoever felt that an ATM machine would unleash banking in a way that it did,
Yeah,
initially
yeah.
it was just going to remove jobs.
Mm.
Whoever felt that the handloom was taking away the job of the weaver would unleash the fashion revolution that we see today. Who would have felt that the candle maker will die and electricity will take off in a different way, things like that, right? So I
Yeah.
think initially our thought process and our reactions
Yeah.
in the taxonomy of what we know today.
Yeah.
But that taxonomy itself will get disrupted, and we all know that. It's just that we don't know the future, so we can't give an answer because the new taxonomy is still evolving. That's how I think.
No, I think super. I think what you're saying is, in short term, it may look like it'll be a bulge, but what will happen is because the constraints above will get removed and we don't know what will happen in the future, it'll actually regress to the demography more than anything else.
Yeah,
Fair.
I mean, think about it this way. I mean, I'm sitting here in my team. I'm hoping that I can get a bunch of freshers and not tell them anything about the past and allow them to invent a new future with no
Got it.
backlog. They
Yeah.
will do wonders. I mean, they are already
Wonders.
doing wonders in some places, but
Yeah.
can we design them to do wonders? Some of them will show you that they can do wonders because that's an accident always of the normal distribution. But can you now design it? That's how I think the opportunity for you and I in this country. I mean, you look around, there are these young people with lots of great ideas, and if we can unbundle them with some of the past knowledge that we are all bundled with, they will lead us to new things. We have to just regulate, put the right regulatory harness in place, and those types of things. But I think there's so much more that is possible, so much experiment is possible that we can't even imagine. Is my view.
I think I just your Michael Faraday example. 40 years ago, when we were drawing that electronic magnetic field, we didn't know what it is capable of. We're just drawing it
Yeah,
just to do the
exactly.
lab.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think just now I'll just shift to leadership at a more personal level, really, right? And there are two, three questions based on that. One is, and AI is evolving. Like yesterday, Google talked about AGI is not very far away. Right now, ACI is going on and so on. So as the decisions, AI is enabling a lot more decisions, so on and so on. People are thinking that leaders should more focus on decision architecture rather than decision making, because AI will actually show what can be done, etc. So decision architecture in terms of creating the action pathways, showing the guardrails, what should be the constraints, and then empowering the people. So I'm thinking some of it at your level you must be already doing it, Ian, but is that what the more junior level leaders should also do instead of making decisions, more focus on creating decision pathways?
Right. So let me give you a. You reminded me of a old example. I used to work for Dell at one point in time, and I met the chief of staff of Michael Dell. This was maybe 15 years ago. I don't know when, long ago. So I asked him. He was an Indian guy, Vivek Mahindra. So I told him that, when I look at this large company and you're an Indian, you can relate to me. Sometimes I think that they are slowing things down. They're not very active. They're not very agile. I mean, why would you not be? And you have seen this company. Michael himself is an entrepreneur, and he talks like an entrepreneur. So why is this organization having so much of friction? Right? And he gave me a very interesting answer, and I'll bring it to what I'm going to say to your question now. He said, Pankaj, look at this company. It has grown from 0 to 40 billion without any acquisition on a totally new business model, at the most rapid pace in corporate history. So I said, yeah, that's fine. So what does it mean? He says, so think about it. This model itself is almost like a nuclear fission reaction. It
Mm.
can go out of control if not controlled.
Mm.
So our job is to actually put governors in place. to
mm,
make sure that it is guided, it is
mm,
regulated, and it doesn't
mm,
go out of control. I
mm,
thought it was a very insightful thought that I had never thought of.
mm,
Now, the way I think about it today is that
mm,
AI and all of these new technologies are almost like that same Dell company, which
mm,
can grow so rapidly, whether it is the piece of code, whether it is anything else, that it can easily go out of control. So the only thing that the leaders need to do is to create a governance mechanism to make sure that doesn't go out of control. So in their case, what he had done was he said, Vivek told me that, most critical decisions, everyone in, Michael's leadership team has to be consulted. So even I'm his chief of staff, but I can't go to him and ask him. He'll say, no, talk to all the others. So sometimes I have to get like 10 of these senior leaders in one room
mm,
to get
mm,
some simple
mm,
decision.
mm,
But
mm,
maybe that is the way the speed governor works, that you don't want to let one or two people just take things forward.
mm,
So I
mm,
think in every place you have to figure out where you are. So now action or generation has become cheap. See, when
mm,
action was hard, then there was
mm,
a different problem. You wanted to
mm,
get people
mm,
into doing things,
mm,
and so
mm,
so so bias for action was great earlier.
mm,
I would say that restraint would be the new skill required in the future, because everyone can act. Think about it.
mm,
Everyone has been given a bazooka. They can all
mm,
fire.
mm,
Who should fire, when, how, what, when, is the question that someone has to determine. So I
mm,
do think that the nature of leadership has to be very different from the past. Past was to galvanize action. Now is to restrain, guide, and coach to make that, because the energy is there, it will flow. Earlier, you
mm,
have to generate energy. So it's almost like that same nuclear fusion that, what do you do? It's already taking place. How do you,
mm, mm.
navigate? And so that's how I think the new role of leadership would be and should be. And it's already, I think some people are realizing it, doing it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the decision making will not go away. Of course, there will be certain transactional decisions AI can take, but the decision is actually decision making focus is actually changed to 180 degrees. In the sense, instead of
So in this
making
AI
immediate
world, I
reaction,
mean,
yeah,
yeah. So judgment and accountability are the keywords if you think about it.
yeah,
That,
yeah.
so if you were to use these open weight models, for example, today, you can use them, but you don't know the training data set. They are open weight, but they are not open source. So you have no idea
Mm,
what is sitting inside it, right? So
mm,
if you were to
mm.
use it and something goes wrong, who's to take accountability for it, right?
Right,
So I think
right.
today everyone has access to everything, but
Mm,
who's putting their name behind it, who's putting their reputation behind it? So I think
mm,
these closed labs are still successful because there's
mm,
$1 trillion company sitting there putting its reputation at stake, saying, if you use my model, I'm
mm,
standing behind it. I'll take
mm,
accountability. I'll go to jail,
mm,
maybe not,
mm,
if things go wrong. But in this open weight model, you are taking the accountability on yourself, right? So I think this
mm,
judgment and accountability, which were always very important, will become super important in future. So who do you trust? Whose
mm.
judgment do you trust? Who will take
Yeah,
accountability?
yeah.
Those questions will become far more important than they were ever before, in my
Mm,
opinion. At a company level, at an individual level, at every level, country level also. whose,
no, I
whose
think
whose country's model will you trust?
no, right now geopolitics. Let's not. That's another topic. No, I think it's evolving so fast. Like for example, both Anthropic as well as Google are calling out saying that stop, but nobody's stopping. But I think you touched an important point in terms of decision making. But the other thing also I wanted to ask you, because in the same vein, because leaders are looking at AI as a very technology, but it's lot more facets and so on. How else is leadership changing? In the sense you touched upon accountability, decision making. How else do you think leaders should adapt themselves in this new era?
Yeah. And being a data guy, both us, just look at some interesting data. And if you saw some of these news articles, all these labs are hiring philosophers, less engineers, right?
Mm,
What do they tell you? Basically, they are saying is, I think we can get engineers, we can get AI to code, but who's to determine the guardrail? And frankly, if these things
mm,
can do pretty much anything possible in this world, and we are talking about AGI, then you really need to think about the deeper questions that are relevant. And who's the
yeah,
best people who are thinking about those deeper questions? The philosophers, right? So, who would have ever imagined that an AI lab would suddenly be hiring philosophers?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's where the biggest scarcity is. So, I think we
Right.
have to look at where is the scarcity shift happening. Scarcity earlier used to be in the coding domain, that is gone. Now it is in the thinking domain. So again, you can think of my ways of thinking that I was saying. Ways of thinking is where the scarcity shift has
Yeah,
taken
yeah,
place.
yeah.
So I do think that these things will continue to evolve, but this thinking layer is where the biggest value will turn out to be. Because if you
Yeah.
think about it that way, that if everything goes away, who's to then determine the priorities? What are the
Yeah.
questions? What should we
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
That will never go away. That was
Yeah.
always there earlier, but a few people can decide that, because you needed an army to determine that. Even in the olden days, that king will decide, I want to build a pyramid, but you needed 100,000 people for 10 years to do that.
Mm.
Today, anything can be done. So how do you determine what is worth doing and who has the decision right, who takes accountability? That is the place is becoming more difficult to this.
Yeah, and that is where I think leaders should also, in one of the books called Reshuffle, he speaks about exactly what you're telling as well, right? Is that where is the value shifting? Because and where are the constraints emerging? And hence,
Yeah.
what can you do, right? So that is a whole.
Yeah.
Right now, everybody
Yes.
is talking about AI adoption, 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 but what else will they do, and so on. Now I'll talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the whole cost element. And suddenly everybody is talking about maxing out tokens and this thing and so on. Yesterday I read a report wherein actually now humans have become cheaper than AI. There was another report which said that the immediate there will be a cost benefit, but in a couple of years you'll have cost plateauing out, wherein 80% will be humans and 20% will be AI. So all sorts of reports are coming, really, right? So, but at a broader level, when you step back, Pankaj, what do you see as AI economics, if I can ask you?
Um, so, so I read this Stanford professor's lecture recently, and he argued that over the last 200 years of history, lots of new technological inventions have happened. But
Yeah.
you see, the economy grew only at 2%, global economy. So why so? If so many new inventions are happening, the curve should have shifted. So he says, I don't have an argument. He says one argument could be that any technology that comes actually gets absorbed and frankly doesn't give new economic growth.
Yeah.
So we need new technologies and new shifts to keep coming in to just sustain 2%. So then he said, will AI help us sustain 2%, or will it go by? And he argues on and on and on, right? So I think you can keep arguing that how the impact of any new technology will be in the economy. But the main argument he also makes was that the whole economy is a complex system,
Hmm.
and the weakest link is where the problem always is in any system. I mean, if you look at that optimization thing, that one of the small thing which is there, then the whole assembly line will move at the pace of the way.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
we can never automate or imagine all parts of the link, and therefore we will never imagine that everything can move fast. I mean, it's like any look at any automobile. You can put a big engine into it, but if all the other components are not redesigned, then it won't work. Then you
Go
do
right.
that, and so this is that golden principle applies everywhere at every level. We all know that, right? So I think therefore the benefits or the mega benefits of anything doesn't happen because those mega benefits were happening in a small area of that complex system, and it is
Hmm.
true, but it is constrained by the rest of the system. It's like having a Einstein sit in one company. You can have the best
Hmm.
ideas, the rest of the company doesn't listen to him.
Hmm.
Nothing will happen, right?
Hmm.
So things like that, right? So I think these AI and AGIs are like those Einstein sitting in these companies, but
Yeah.
on their own, what can anyone do if no one else relates to them and engages with them, and they also start to move at the same speed, and therefore any technology diffusion is a generational cycle. By the way, there's a nice book by my friend Dr. Ali. He's the founder of a company called Sky Analytics in California. In fact, I was having a chat with him last week. So he argues in that 100 year of AI book that every technology took 20 years to settle down,
Hmm.
because it is the human being who will experiment, try, then the next one, this one. It's only the new generation which is not exposed to the past who does the most aggressive experiments. And
Hmm.
therefore, over 20 years is when you can expect something meaningful to happen of that original technology. The
Hmm.
existing
Hmm.
people will not be able to take advantage because they're still stuck in the old ways, right? So our human ability to change is the constraint to technology benefit rather than the technology itself, and we all know that intuitively. So I think that is what I think will happen with AI also. People will figure out new things, new constraints will emerge, and in different domains the impact will be different. Manufacturing will be very different from, let's say, consumer
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
healthcare or banking.
Hmm.
Country wise also, Europe will be different from China, right? So I think we can talk about macro, but the answer will be more micro in certain economies, certain domain, in certain companies within those industries and things like that. So I think the more relevant answers will be found over there. at a macro level, 2% economic growth only. Quite boring.
I think no, I think Alvin Toffler talked about, right. He has this whole concept of 800 lifetime, wherein he says that if you divide the whole 10,000 years or 15,000 years of after the ice age, after the last ice age, into lifetimes, then it's about we are in the 801st lifetime. If you look at the innovations, technological innovations and overall innovations in a lifetime, they are more than sum total of all the previous ones, but it's still 2%.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
future
Yeah.
shock.
Yes. 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 I remember that. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. So they
So
are all, I think, coming from different places and probably saying similar things. So I
correct.
think the world is a far more complex place for any one disciplined person to
Yeah.
fully analyze it. They will analyze it from their lens. In fact, there's this framework in economics. I learned about it from my daughters who were studying economics. It's called the PESTEL framework,
Yeah.
PESTL,
Yeah.
politics, economics, social, technological, environmental, legal.
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
some sense, they say that there are these six variables to measure countries, and frankly, you can measure any phenomena. And no one person is understanding the interplay of all those six variables, because people have specialized in one or more, but not all six. So no one is able to see the big picture and the interplay over a period of time, because those things, like game theory, compound over time. So I don't think, therefore, human mind is good at able to predict some of these things where some complex variables interplay happen over time periodically and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. Michael Porter. So yeah. So just the last question to wrap it up, Pankaj. I am not keeping track of time because but last question. If you had to redesign the organization, because I think you spoke about the three layers to that level, but I'm just going to most basic because I think you would love to do. What were the design principles if you were top two or three, whatever you think, or one key design principle that people should keep in mind if they have to redesign today?
Yeah. So let me share with you one more framework before answering that question. So this framework I call is the 3P framework, and I call it process, product, and purpose.
Mm.
And the way I have framed it, I said, I used to be a process owner long back.
Yeah,
Then I became a product owner, and
yeah,
now I'm a purpose owner.
yeah,
And the reason for that gradation is that in those days, process was complex and very hard to grapple.
yeah,
And if you became a process owner, you were doing something very meaningful. And then process became easy. Six Sigma people came and they made it easy. So the process did not capture so much value. So product started capturing value. Oh, you are a product person. You embedded process into it. So product owners became really the valuable jobs. Today, I think the purpose owner, meaning who owns the business goal or the business metric.
yeah,
They can have product owners, they can have process owners, or they can have that expertise, but you have to own the outcome, right?
yeah,
So I think the evolution has happened through technology and through innovation to allow each of us to become purpose owners, to say, I will own the outcome. I will
mm,
learn the product process or get the right
yeah,
people involved to own that, right? So we have come to that stage over that period of time. And I think today that's why we are talking about single man unicorn. Who's that single man unicorn? That fellow has applied agents and other things, and but he or she owns the outcome. That's how I think this whole 3P framework plays out. Now, therefore, the answer to your question using this would be that if I'm in a traditional organization, I have a
mm,
legacy already. I can't redesign it. So I have to allow that same product development principle to play out, that you continue to own the outcome of your business, but continue to do experiments in the 3W layers and allow that organization also to morph into something different. Don't say what it is, just like you're not saying what the final product is. Allow it to just evolve into the next natural state and the next natural state. So allow that transitional thing just in the agile sprint will do for you. If you're a new company, start with the idea of a single man unicorn and then add any more people
yeah,
if required. So two different examples depending on where you start and anything in between.
yeah. I think that goes back to the accountability chart we spoke about. I think this 3P
Yeah,
purpose owner fits so well there as well, saying that if you
right.
own the purpose, then everything else
Yeah,
fits in as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it was wonderful, Pankaj, to talk to you.
Absolutely lovely. I think, like I said, that all conversations lead me to reflect, refine, in things like that. So I just enjoy doing these things because it helps my thought process to continue to update my own machine learning model in my head through these conversations.